Hello, and welcome. My name is Chris, and I'm the founder and CEO of Delphinex, a consulting and informatics company focused on DNA-encoded libraries, medicinal chemistry, and cheminformatic solutions. In this demo, I'll introduce Delve, a pipeline I developed to support DNA-encoded library design, enumeration, decoding, and analysis. I'll begin with a tour of the program, and then walk you through a typical use case. Whether you're exploring custom library design or building out a Delve data pipeline, this should give you a clear picture of what Delve can do for you. Let's get started. On screen, you'll see the Pipeline tab. This tab in Delve offers a powerful, end-to-end workflow for DNA-encoded library design and analysis. Users start by selecting and filtering building blocks using custom rules or property-based criteria. From there, Delve applies user-trained machine learning models to predict building block reactivity in the context of specific chemistry. After enumeration, cheminformatic analysis is performed automatically, generating key molecular descriptors and interactive visualizations. Finally, Delve runs binding predictions against a user-defined biological target, helping prioritize compounds for synthesis or screening. The pipeline is flexible by design. It supports standard enumeration workflows, but also enables a reverse approach, screening every design-amenable building block in an inventory and using predicted binding scores to guide which building block should go into the final library. This approach helps shift decision-making earlier in the process, reducing waste and improving hit rates. The next tab is the Counterscreen tab. This tab allows users to evaluate an existing enumerated library against additional biological targets without rerunning the full enumeration workflow. By applying machine learning-based binding prediction models to previously generated compounds, users can efficiently assess off-target interactions, explore selectivity profiles, or repurpose existing libraries for new targets. This streamlined process saves time and compute, making it easier to derive more value from each library. The next tab is the Reactivity Model tab. This tab enables users to build custom machine learning models that predict building block reactivity. Using experimental validation data, users can train a logistic regression model to classify whether a building block is likely to succeed in a given reaction context. This allows Delve to tailor reactivity predictions to specific chemistries, improving the quality and efficiency of library design by filtering out unreactive components early in the process. The next tab, the Decoding tab, translates post-screening sequencing data into meaningful chemical insight. Users provide DNA barcodes from the screen and a pre-existing enumeration file. Delve then matches each barcode to its corresponding compound, identifying hits across the library. This platform generates an interactive cube plot for visualizing hit distribution and calculates key physicochemical properties to aid in hit triage. A user-defined UMI cutoff ensures robust filtering of sequencing noise, helping distinguish true binders from background. The final tab, which for now is called the Linear Enumeration tab, and admittedly I'm still working on developing, is designed to support parallel hit resynthesis, particularly in 96-well plate format. By specifying reaction components, users can generate a plate map that lays out the required combinations for each well. This feature streamlines the transition from Delve hits to resynthesized compounds, making it easy to plan and execute follow-up synthesis directly from Delve. This concludes the tour of the program. Now I'd like to continue on with a typical use case. We begin by specifying an input file, which I'll walk through in more detail in just a moment. Next, we choose whether to apply filters to the input building blocks, based on chemical properties or functional groups. The bulk checkbox is hard-coded to remove reagents, very large molecules, and other compounds unlikely to be used in library synthesis. This makes it easy to feed in an entire inventory if desired. The design filter checkbox is tied to a design file that defines the bond-forming reactions between building blocks. This filter removes problematic components, like building blocks with multiple reactive groups that could lead to undesired side products. For this demonstration, I'll leave both filters unchecked, since the building blocks were already rigorously curated. Next, we select the design from the drop-down menu here. Choosing a design automatically updates the image shown in the Design Image console. More design templates are available than I'm showing here. The next three input boxes allow us to specify user-trained logistic regression models that predict building block reactivity for each of the 3 cycles of the library. These models are optional, but can help filter out unreactive compounds early in the process. Then we specify a binding prediction model. In this case, I'm using Complex, an open source model from MIT released under an MIT license. I recommend checking out their excellent paper for more details. We also provide a FASTA file for the target of interest. If you don't specify a binding model or a FASTA file, Delve will simply perform the enumeration without binding predictions. This is helpful if you have an extremely large data set and want to speed up this whole process, or if you simply do not want the binding model to be run on your enumerated compounds. Lastly, we define the output directory. With everything set up, we simply click Run. You'll see real-time updates in the status console as the pipeline progresses. While that runs, let's have a closer look at the enumeration input file. It contains columns for the building block ID, SMILES strings, quantity in milligrams, useful for filtering out low stock items in an inventory, the DNA barcode of each compound, and optionally, a building block position. If no position is provided, Delve will flexibly place each building block in any position it's chemically compatible with, given the design you've chosen, even across multiple positions. Now, we'll let the pipeline run and come back shortly to review the outputs. And we're back. The pipeline has completed its run. As shown in the status console, it took about 1 hour to enumerate roughly 884,000 compounds on my local machine. The results are deposited in the specified output directory, organized into 4 folders: the MVS output folder, the enumeration output folder, the complex output folder, and the Cheminformatic plots output folder. Let's walk through each. MVS stands for Maximum Viable Set, and in this folder, you'll find lists of building blocks that are compatible with each stage of the design, along with basic physicochemical properties and reactivity model outputs. In this demo, since the building blocks were pre-filtered, this output is mostly redundant. But when working with an uncurated inventory, this is where you determine which building block is actually usable at each library position. This can be based on reactivity, structure, and compatibility with design scheme. Let's have a look at one of those files now. You can see that these are constructed, at least to start with, a little bit like your input file. There's building block IDs, SMILES strings, and the amount available in the inventory in milligrams. From there, SMILES is included. This is kind of a sanitized version of SMILES that's useful for the purposes of the pipeline. The DNA barcode assigned to each building block, some basic physicochemical properties, as well as these last 2 columns, Y-hat and Y-prob, which correspond to the reactivity ML model's predictions. Now let's continue on with the next folder, the enumeration output folder. This folder contains 2 files, one for a successful enumeration and one for a failed enumeration. To illustrate error handling, I've intentionally included a building block in the 3rd position with multiple reactive sites, causing it to fail. In the fail file, you'll find all compounds derived from that building block, annotated with error codes that explain the cause of failure. In contrast, the pass file lists every successfully enumerated compound, along with DNA barcodes and computed physicochemical properties. This file is critical as it forms the foundation for hit decoding later on. Let's have a look at these files. We'll begin with the failed enumeration file. You'll see that it includes columns for each building block, as well as the corresponding SMILES and DNA barcode for those building blocks that would comprise the enumeration. So you can see building blocks 1, 2, and 3. You also see this error column that tells you the problem is in building block 3, and it also lists the nature of the problem, that multiple products would be formed. We can also have a look at the past file. So this file, much like the one we saw before, includes the standard enumeration outputs, so building block IDs, SMILES, and barcodes for positions 1, 2, and 3, in addition to the fully enumerated SMILES. We also get a wealth of physicochemical properties calculated here, and that includes a sum of Lipinski and Weber violations here at the end, which is very useful if you're trying to design a library that fits nicely within drug-like properties. All right, the next folder we'll have a look at is this complex output folder. It includes 4 files. One of the files is for all enumerated compounds ranked by their predicted binding score. And there's an additional file for each building block position summarizing the contributions of those building blocks on predicted binding. The overall file ranks compounds by their complex scores, while those per position files analyze which building blocks most frequently appear in top scoring compounds, giving you insight into which components are driving target engagement across the library. This can be used in a couple of different ways. First, if you've created this library or you plan to create this library as is, it allows you to get a preview into what might show up as a hit later on. Alternatively, if you're using this in an exploratory fashion, trying to determine which building blocks to pick to begin with, this will give you a good starting point. Now let's have a look at some of these files. Here is the building block 1 file with complex results. So it looks a little bit like the MVS file. It lists building block IDs, smiles, amounts, C-smiles, and DNA barcodes, as well as a variety of physicochemical properties. However, this last column is now present, top bin. The higher this number, including 0 as the highest number, the more frequently these building blocks were found in high-ranking hits in the fully enumerated compounds. Similarly, I can show you the file for the entire design. This looks much like the enumeration files that you've seen already, listing building block ID, smiles, and barcodes for positions 1, 2, and 3, the fully enumerated smiles, various physicochemical properties, and finally ending with these two columns here, complex score and rank. For complex score, the closer that number is to 1, the better it is, and rank is obvious, of course. This allows you to then determine which compounds are more likely to show up in your screen. Last, but certainly not least, are the Cheminformatic plots. This folder contains a series of visual analyses that characterize the overall properties of the library. There are a number of key highlights that I can show you: a radar plot of Lipinski and Weber parameters, a PMI plot to assess 3D shape diversity, and a UMAP projection to visualize the library's overall comparison with existing chemical space. I'll show you some of those now. So there is the UMAP, showing where this particular library, called Design 1, appears versus an FDA-approved group of molecules, as well as the NIH Next library. This is a Lipinski-Weber radar plot. You can see we didn't control the properties especially well on this little test library, with it kind of going out of whack at hydrogen bond donors, rotatable bonds, and total polar surface area, but it does give you a general sense of where these properties sit for the overall library. The blue line here is where the edge of ideal would be. The red line is the average of the design, and this kind of gray space is the range over which you can find compounds in this particular library. And here's that PMI analysis showing you that this library is largely linear with just a little bit of diversity towards spherical, not very much towards disc-shaped. If you'd like to see the full range of plots, please visit our website at delphinex.com, where a gallery is available on the homepage. This concludes our tour of the Pipeline tab. For this demo, I'll be skipping the counter screen and reactivity model tabs and jumping ahead to decoding. Now here we are in the decoding tab. The decoding tab allows us to translate screening data into chemical insight. Here we take a list of hit DNA barcodes and, using the enumeration file generated earlier in the pipeline, map those barcodes back to building block IDs, chemical structures, and library metadata. We also generate an interactive cube plot for visualizing the results. We begin by specifying the hit file, right here, which I'll show shortly. Next, we point to the enumeration file from earlier in the pipeline run. This file provides the mapping between barcodes and compounds. The point size allows us to adjust the marker size in the cube plot. We're also able to set a UMI threshold to help filter out low confidence hits. Finally, we're able to specify the output location and click Run to start the process. Before we do that, let me show you this input file. It's really quite simple. It simply includes 3 columns, including the barcodes that have been identified from screening, as well as the UMIs. With that, we can simply click Run and begin the process. Once this process completes, we'll be able to review hit structures, download summaries, and explore trends visually through the interactive plot. And we're back. As you can see in the status console, decoding has completed. On my local machine, this typically takes no more than a minute or so. Let's have a look at the results. In the specified output directory, we now have a new folder called Hit Finder. Inside, you'll find the original input hit file, which has been copied here for easy reference, 2 decoded results files, 1 collapsed and 1 uncollapsed, a box plot summarizing our hits, and a fail file containing any barcode combinations that couldn't be decoded using the provided enumeration file. The collapsed decoded file groups together repeated hits, adding a frequency column so you can quickly see which compounds are appearing most often. The uncollapsed version retains all raw decoded entries. It's worth noting that the decoding process includes a SNP correction algorithm, which helps account for single nucleotide errors in sequencing and improves robustness when matching barcodes. Let's have a look at the collapsed decoded hits file first. Here you can see this file includes the fully enumerated SMILES string, as well as the building block IDs and SMILES strings for each of the building blocks which compose the enumerated compound. This last column here, frequency, tells you how often that enumerated SMILES was found in the hit list. These 3 other columns, building block 1, 2, and 3 plot, are used to generate the box plot that we'll have a look at next. So here's that box plot. It is an interactive box plot in the sense that we can roll it around and see what we can see. We can also mouse over the individual points on this box plot and observe which building blocks correspond to that particular point. We can also get a frequency number here, both by scrolling over as well as visually by looking at the size of the individual points. So here you can see we have a couple of lines throughout this particular box plot telling us that we might have a little bit of SAR in this library. Of course, these are all mock results, but this is the sort of thing one would hope to see after successfully screening your DNA-encoded library. This concludes our tour of Delve. We've covered the full workflow, from input setup and building block filtration to enumeration, ML predictions, and comprehensive output analysis. Whether you're using Delve to enumerate a specific design or to mine an entire inventory for buildable, target-relevant compounds, this platform is built to support both exploratory and production-level work. If you'd like to learn more, request a demo, or discuss custom solutions, please visit Delphinex.com or reach out directly at info@delphinex.com. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to hearing from you.